Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. In today's tutorial, we're making a modern tee. For this make, we went with the almond stitch with a twist, a nice racing stripe that draws the eye and offers a flattering shape. Speaking of, I would be flattered if you continue to check out the channel. We have hundreds of modern crochet tutorials and patterns with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 245 grams of yarn, and that's 540 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order. And enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if there's a theme song or a jingle that you randomly sing throughout the day. Mine pretty much always varies, but right now it's between the Yu Yu Hakusho theme song and Jurassic Park. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for size small, but you can adjust it for your size and explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that is in multiples of 8 that reaches from the base of our neck down to where like the bottom of this top to be, so you can make this cropped or full length. I'd like for mine to be full length, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 64, and that's roughly 15 inches or 38 centimeters. And I actually already have my middle detail all completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do an additional chain 4. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. That is going to count as our base chain, so now I have a total of 68 chains. Now we're going to do a half double crochet row. Start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. From here, yarn over, into that third chain from our hook, insert with a half double crochet. We're all going to bring our hook down, and into that third chain, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through. When we have 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 3. Doing that again, yarn over, into that next chain, pull through all 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. We are at the end of our row 1. Now we're going to get started on row 2. So we're going to chain 2, flip our work, and now put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. So just to do the first one, yarn over. Into that first stitch, insert into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us, and yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. And from here, continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and that's it for this portion. At the end of the row, simply chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop double crochet into every stitch again. We're going to be continuing to repeat our previous row with no increases and no decreases until we have a portion that can stretch to the width of the base of our neck. And we do need to make sure that we're all ending right after an odd number row. Then I'll meet you back just to do a few more neckline rows. We are back. I've just completed my middle detail portion. I have a total of 11 rows. This width is roughly 4.5 inches or 12 centimeters. Now we're going to do just a few more neckline rows. So for everyone, no matter what size we're making, we're all going to start with a chain 1 and flip our work. So now that our work is flipped, we're all going to start with 4 back loop slip stitches. So finding that first stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert into that back loop, then yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. There's our first. Into that next stitch, another back loop slip. So into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. Again, next stitch is back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. And we do need to be working in multiples of 4, so we have 1 more back loop slip stitch to do. Then from here, 4 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over, into that next stitch with 1, next stitch with our second, next stitch with our third, and next stitch with our fourth back loop half double crochet. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 4 back loop slip stitches and 4 back loop half double crochets until we all have 4 stitches left. And just a really quick tip when it comes to doing our back loop slip stitches, make sure we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. So we've made our way all the way down with our back loop slip and back loop half double crochets, leaving the last 4 stitches. Now what we're going to do is our increase, and this should be the same increase for everyone because the last set of stitches that everyone should have done should have been back loop half double crochets. So we're all going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into each of the next 3 stitches, so leaving that last stitch. Here are my 3 back loop slip stitches. Into that last stitch, we are all going to do an increase of 3 back loop single crochets. So into that back loop, there's 1 back loop single crochet, same back loop with a second back loop single crochet, and same with a third. Now this first almond stitch row should have 2 more stitches than our previous row. Now from here, we are going to need to increase into our following row as well, so chain 1 and flip. Now we're going to start this following row off with an increase as well. Since we're along the top, it should be the same for everyone. Again, we're all going to start with an increase of 3 back loop single crochets into that first stitch. So there is 1 back loop single, a second back loop single, and a third back loop single all into that first stitch. Then we're all going to do 5 back loop slip stitches. So into that next stitch, there is 1 back loop slip, there is 2 back loop slip, 3, 4, and 5. And now from here, we're all going to be doing 4 back loop half double, 4 back loop slip, making our way all the way down. So just as a really quick tip when it comes to doing our almond stitches, it is going to be a 4-row repeat. Our second row is always going to have the same stitches on top of each other. So as you guys can see, this next little section that we have is half double crochets. So since we just finished our back loop slip stitches, we are going to be doing back loop half double crochets on top of the next 4 stitches, which is great. So yarn over into that next stitch is 1 back loop half double, next stitch with our second, next stitch with our third, and next stitch with our fourth, making sure that they're all within the back loops. Then 4 back loop slip, 4 back loop half doubles to reach the end of the row. Our first 2 rows for our almond stitch row repeat are complete. Now to get started on our third row for our 4-row repeat, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. Now when it comes to doing our third row in our almond stitch row repeat, we're now going to be doing the opposite from what our previous row stitches look like. So since the last few stitches that we had of our previous row were back loop slip stitches, we're now going to be doing back loop half double crochets. So yarn over into that first stitch with a back loop half, next stitch with a back loop half until we have a total of 4 back loop half double crochets. And now 4 back loop slip stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. From here, continue to repeat 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips till we have 4 stitches left. So we are back. We are nearly completed with our third increase row for our almond stitch detail. We should all have 4 stitches left, and how we're all going to do this increase is actually the same as the first row. So starting with 3 back loop slip stitches into the following 3 stitches, then into that last available stitch, an increase of 3 back loop single crochets. Now that that increase is complete, we're now going to get started on the following row, so chain 1 and flip. And we're going to start this increase row off with an increase of 3 back loop single crochets as well, all into that first stitch. And now that we have our increase, 5 back loop slip stitches. And now to complete our row 4 in our 4-row repeat, 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slips to reach the end of the row. So we are back. Our first 4 rows for my almond stitch 4-row repeat is completed. Now from here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat our 4 previous rows until we have a portion that can reach all the way to the top of our shoulder. Now we do want to make sure that the top of our middle detail still stays at the base of our neck. Then I'll meet you back once this reaches the top of our shoulder, making sure that we have rows in multiples of 4, just counting this almond stitch detail. So we are back. I have just completed my first section of my neckline. This is the almond stitch portion. I have a total of 12 of just almond stitch rows. My total width is roughly 7 inches or 18 centimeters, and the height that I have is roughly 18 inches or 46 centimeters. Now from here we're going to do our shoulder, and this shoulder isn't going to have any increases or decreases. We all should have ended along the bottom in multiples of 4, so our following was going to start with 4 back loop slip stitches. So we're all going to chain 1, flip our work. 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half doubles, making our way all the way down until we reach the end of the row. Our first shoulder row is complete, which was just our first almond stitch row with no increases and no decreases. It is still going to be a 4-row repeat, so the second row in our 4-row repeat, we're going to chain 1, flip our work. Start with back loop slips, back loop half doubles, then make our way all the way down, and I'll meet you back at the end of the row. Our second shoulder row is complete. Now getting started on our third row repeat, we're going to start with half doubles. So since we're along the bottom, chain 2, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop half doubles, then 4 back loop slips to reach the end of the row. Our third shoulder row is complete. Now to complete our 4-row repeat, our fourth row is going to start with back loop half doubles again. So chain 2, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches to reach the end of that row. We are back and our first 4 shoulder rows are complete. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 4 previous rows with no increases and no decreases until we now have a portion that can reach the corner of our underarm. So making sure we're placing our half double crochet detail right at mid-chest, we want this to be able to stretch to the corner of our underarm. It does still need to be worked in multiples of 4, so I'll meet you back along the bottom and then we can finish up with our underarm together. I am back and I have just completed my shoulder portion. Now, counting just the almond stitch rows, I now have a total of 16 rows, and this width, including the middle portion, is roughly 8 inches or 20 centimeters. Now we're all going to get started on our underarm. So first things first, we're all going to put this up to ourselves, making sure that the top of our middle detail is still at the base of our neck, and the top of our shoulder portion is at the top of our shoulder. And we're all going to start by inserting our stitch marker into any stitch that is in multiples of 8 that's nearest to the corner of our underarm. So I inserted my stitch marker into the 32nd stitch from the top, that's roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here we're going to get started on our following almond stitch row. We all should have ended along the bottom, so chain 1, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop slip stitches, 4 back loop half doubles, and make our way all the way up until we all have 4 stitches left right before our stitch marker. So we've made our way up with our first underarm row, leaving 4 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now what we're all going to do is 1 back loop slip stitch and a decrease of 3 back loop slip stitches right after that. So we're going to do that next stitch, which is a back loop slip, then a decrease of 3. So how that's going to work is inserting our hook into that next stitch, pull through, next stitch is back loop, pull through, and also next stitch is back loop, which should be the stitch right before our stitch marker. Then when we have all 4 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 4. And that is going to be how we do this row's decrease. Now from here, chain 1 and flip our work. And we are starting this row with a decrease as well, so another decrease of 3 back loop slip stitches. So inserting our hook into that first stitch is back loop, pull through, next stitch is back loop, pull through, and next stitch is back loop. When we have all 4 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through all 4 loops. That is our decrease. Then still the same for everyone, we're all going to be putting 3 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over into that next stitch is back loop with our first half double, next stitch is back loop with our second half double, and then into that next stitch is back loop with our third half double. Then from here, continue on with the rest of the row per usual. So 4 back loop slip stitches, 4 back loop half double crochets. We are back and our second underarm row is complete. Now the following 2 rows are going to be done pretty much the same way as our 2 previous rows, but just to get them started, the following row is going to start with back loop half doubles. So chain 2, flip our work. 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches, making our way up, leaving the last 4 stitches. We've made our way up with our third underarm row. Now we're going to do our decrease together, which is going to be done the same way as our first underarm row. So we should all have 4 stitches left. Start with 1 back loop slip, then a decrease of 3 back loop slip. So into that third to last stitch, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, insert, yarn over, pull through all 4. Our third underarm row is complete. Now just to get started on the following row, chain 1, flip our work, and start with a decrease of 3 back loop slips again. So into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through, and next stitch, yarn over, pull through 4. Then for everyone, 3 back loop half double crochets. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and continue on with the rest of our row. So 4 back loop slip stitches, 4 back loop half doubles to reach the end of the row. Now all we're going to do is continue to repeat our 4 previous rows until we now have a portion that can reach over to mid underarm. Now the amount of rows that we have still needs to be in multiples of 4, but once we have that last row completed, do not cut because I'll meet you back to do our last official row. We are back. My underarm portion is complete. Now I have a total of 20 rows and we're now all going to do our last row, which is just going to be an evening out row. So we all should have ended along the bottom. We're all going to chain 1, flip our work, start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half doubles to reach the end of the row. This last row will not have any increases or decreases. Go ahead and make your way all the way up. Once we do, then we can do a chain of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. Now getting started on the other side of our front panel, we're all going to start by inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of the front panel that is along the same side as our neckline. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook and start with an increase of 3 single crochets. So that is my increase of 3 single crochets. Just for this first row only, we are not going to be working into the back loops because we want it to look like the other side as much as possible. And all we're going to do from here is 3 slip stitches, then continue on with our pattern per usual. So 4 half doubles, 4 slip stitches to reach the end of the row. Then just to get started on the following row so that we know how to do this increase, we're going to chain 1, flip our work. Start our following row off with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half doubles, and now I will meet you back when we have 6 stitches left. We've made our way down with our second row. We should all have 6 stitches left. Now, the last set of stitches that we all should have done should have been 4 back loop half double crochets. Now what we're going to do is 5 back loop slip stitches, and then into that last stitch, an increase of 3 back loop single crochets. So there's my first back loop slip, second, third, fourth, fifth, then into that last stitch, an increase of 3 back loop single crochets. Since we're here, we might as well get started on the following row, so chain 1 and flip. And now getting started on our row 3, since we're here, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work. Start our following row off with an increase of 3 back loop single crochets, then 3 back loop slip stitches, then completing the row with 4 back loop half double and 4 back loop slip stitches to reach the end of the row. Then for our row 4, we're going to chain 2, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches, making our way all the way down. Then just like our row 2, we're going to continue that till we have 6 stitches left. Then close off our row 4 with 5 back loop slip stitches and an increase of 3 back loop single crochets. Then from here, we're basically just going to be repeating these 4 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as the neckline portion on this side. Once we have that completed, I'll meet you back so that we can do our shoulder together from there. We are back and the neckline portion for this side is complete. Now my total width is roughly 11 inches or 28 centimeters, and now we're going to do the same exact shoulder portion that we did on this side. So since we all end along the top, chain 1, flip our work, then do our following 4 row almond stitch row repeat with absolutely no increases and no decreases for the same amount of shoulder rows that we have on this side. Once we have the same amount of rows, we should all end along the top. So once we do a chain up a 1 and cut, then I'll meet you guys back to finish up with our underarm. So we are back. Our shoulder portion is complete. I now have a total width of just about 12 inches or 30 centimeters. Now we're going to get started on our underarm. So we should have all done a chain up a 1 and cut right after our last shoulder row. Then what we're going to do from here is insert our stitch marker into the same amount of stitches that we inserted into on this side. So if you guys have my numbers, I inserted my stitch marker into my 32nd stitch from the top. So I did the same thing on this side. Then to make sure that all of our ribbing matches, we're going to be inserting our same 5mm hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our stitch marker stitch, working down towards the bottom into that back loop. So this is my stitch marker stitch. Into that next available stitch's back loop, I'm going to insert my hook and insert my yarn onto my hook. Now we're all going to do our decrease, so we're going to pull through and do a chain up a 1 to secure it. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to secure it. And starting with a decrease of 3 back loop slip stitches, we're going to start by inserting our hook into that same stitch that our chain is in. So into that same back loop, pull through, next stitch is back loop, pull through, next stitch is back loop. When we have these 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 4. Then for everyone, into that next available stitch, insert with just 1 back loop slip stitch. Then from here, continue on with the rest of our row per usual. So for everyone, it's going to be 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches till we reach the end of the row. Then once we do reach the end of the row, just to make sure that we know how to do our decreases for this portion, chain 1, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop slip stitches, 4 back loop half doubles, and make your way all the way back up. And I'll meet you back when we have a total of 6 stitches left. So we are back, and our second underarm row is nearly complete. We've made our way all the way back up, leaving the last 6 stitches. Now we're going to do this decrease together. Now into the next 3 stitches, we're going to be putting 1 back loop half double crochet into the next 3. So these are my 3 back loop half double crochets that we should have all just done. Now we're going to close off the row since we have 3 stitches left with a decrease of 3 back loop slip stitches. So into that third to last stitch, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last. Then yarn over, pull through all 4 loops. Then from here, we're going to continue on with our almond stitch rows, making sure that we're decreasing the same way that we just did along the top of our piece for the same amount of rows that we did for our first underarm portion. Now we're going to continue to do that for the same amount of rows, but keeping in mind that that last row for the other side as well didn't have any increases or decreases into it. We're going to repeat that. Once we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so we are back. We have just completed the entirety of our front panel. Now I have a total width of roughly 13 inches or 33 centimeters. Now from here we're all going to get started on our back panel. So first things first, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for our last underarm row. Now I had a total of 52 stitches here, so I'm going to make a chain of 52. But I actually have the underarm portion for my back panel completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. So now that we all have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row. Start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, the second chain from our hook, insert with our first slip stitch, and just like for the front panel, we're all going to be starting with 4 slip stitches. Now that we all have our 4 slip stitches, next is 4 half double crochets. And now that we have our first 8 stitches for our row 1 completed, continue to repeat our 4 slip stitches and 4 half double crochets till we all have 4 chains left. Once we have 4 chains left, we're going to have to close it off with the same increase that we did for the front panel's neckline. So it's going to be 3 slip stitches and then an increase of 3 single crochets into that last stitch. There are my 3 slip stitches, and into that last chain an increase of 3 singles. Now our row 1 is complete. So getting started on row 2, chain 1, flip our work. We're going to have to start this row off with an increase as well. Now they're going to be an increase of 3 back loop single crochets all into that first stitch. Then just like the front panel, 5 back loop slip stitches, then continue with 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches to reach the end of the row. Now our first 2 underarm rows are completed. Now what we're going to do from here is continue to do the same increases that we did for the front panel's neckline. So since we're at the end of our row 2, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches, making our way all the way up. When we have 4 stitches left, the same increase that we did for row 1. Then our following row is going to start with the same increase that we did for row 2. So an increase of 3 back loop singles, 5 back loop slip stitches, then just continue with 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips to reach the end of the row. We're just going to continue to repeat those 4 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as our front panel's underarm portion minus 1, because remember that that last row for our front panel's underarm portion didn't have any increases or decreases into it. So I just want to meet you guys back to remind you that we won't have any increases. So get our following rows completed and then I'll meet you back. So we are back. Our underarm portion is nearly complete. I'm just going to talk you guys through that last row. So we all should have ended along the bottom. Once we have that completed, we're going to chain 1, flip our work. Start with 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half doubles, and make your way all the way up, closing off the row with no increases and no decreases. So we should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Now once we have that last row completed, we're then going to make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on the front panel's underarm portion. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 32 stitches. So over here, I made a chain 32. Then from here, the back panel is going to be solid. We're just going to chain 1, flip our work, do our 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half doubles, making our way all the way down. Then we're just going to continue to do our 4 row repeat with no increases and no decreases until we have a portion that is roughly the same width as our front panel from our first shoulder row all the way across to our last shoulder row. Now the amount of rows that we need to have, including the underarm, still needs to be in multiples of 4, but now -1 because we should have an odd number of rows for our underarm portion, so that'll make us all end along the bottom. Then once we have that, I will meet you guys back. We are back. I've just made my way all the way across with the width of my back panel. Now I have a total of 36 rows. My width is roughly 8.5 inches or 27 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to finish up with our underarm. I'm just going to talk you guys through it because it's actually just going to be the same underarm as the first one that we did for the front panel. So all we're going to do is make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of stitches that we did for the front panel. So for me it was 32. Then we're going to do our following decrease rows for the same amount of rows that we did for the front panel, but remembering that the last one does not have any increases or decreases. Once we have that completed, I will meet you back. We are back. I have just completed the entirety of my back panel. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut right after my last row. My width is roughly 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to seam our front panel to the back panel, starting with the sides. So just to show you guys what the front and the back of the almond stitches look like, the front of the almond stitches looks like it has these little pockets within it, and the back looks like it has these little ridges. The front is going to be the pockets. So we're going to make sure that the pockets are faced in towards each other, placing our front panel on top of our back panel. We're then going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel and insert our yarn onto our hook. Pulling our working yarn through, we're all going to do a chain up of 1 just to secure. And just do a single crochet seam. So finding that first stitch from the front panel, insert. First stitch into the back panel, insert, and now just single crochet around everything. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert. Next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet, and we're just going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up 1 and cut and repeat on the other side. So we have just completed seaming our sides. Now we're going to seam our shoulders. So first things first, we're going to make sure the work is still flipped wrong side out, wrong side up, meaning the seams that we did for the sides are still along the outside. Then insert your hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're still going to do a single crochet seam, putting 1 single crochet into every side row. We're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now let's find our first side row together, and this one is mine right here. Find that top loop within the front panel, find that same top loop within the back panel, and single crochet. Let's do that again. Finding that next side row within the front panel, find that top loop, insert, next top loop within the back panel, insert, and single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue with 1 single crochet into every side row so we don't have any more left to work into. Then do a chain up of 1 and cut and repeat on the other side. So we are back. Our shoulders are all seamed up. Now we're going to get started on the collar. So first things first, making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to insert our hook into any stitch that we have along our neckline and do a single crochet row. So I'm going to start by working into my back panel first, and all that's going to be is just 1 single crochet into every side row, working our way across our back panel. Then working our way down our front panel, 1 single crochet into every side almond stitch row until I reach our half double crochet portion. Once we do, I'll meet you guys back once we reach our first side half double crochet row, because we are going to be alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So we've just made our way all the way around with our single crochet row, and now we have reached our first side half double crochet row. Now just to show you guys, we are going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So just finding our first side half double crochet row, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Into my next side row, I'm going to insert into that top loop with 2. So there's 1, and then there's 2. Again, into my next side row, there is 1. Into my next side row, there will be 2. So there's 1, there's 2. From here, continue on with this so we don't have any more side half double crochet rows left to work into. Then complete the rest of this by putting 1 single crochet into every side row. Then I'll meet you back to get started on the length. And just as a really quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So when it's completed, try your piece on. If it's a little bit too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. So we've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Now what we're going to do from here is the length of our collar. So right after we have slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to want to make a chain the length that we like for the collar to be. I'd like for mine to be roughly an inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 6. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch. Now put 1 slip stitch into every chain. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything, and continue to reach the end of our chain, making sure that we're still not tugging too tightly. Now that we've made our way all the way down, we're going to slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. So insert your hook with a slip stitch. That slip stitch into the base doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. Flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So starting with that first stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base, insert into that back loop, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch to reach the end of the row, then chain 1. Flip your work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I will meet you back at the end of our row 3. We've just made our way all the way down with our row 3. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So just into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch to connect. It is going to be done the same way as our previous row. Then just to get started on the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. From here, continue to repeat our 2 previous rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way around. Then I'll meet you back when we don't have any more stitches left to work into so that we can seam it together. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it together. So first things first, this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam. So start by making sure that all of our work is flipped right side out. We are then going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then yarn over, pull through everything. Start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over and pull through everything, and continue doing this till we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So getting started on the sleeve, what we're going to do is make sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're all going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. Then we're just going to clean up the edge of our armhole. So what we're all going to do is start by doing a decrease of 2 back loop single crochets into the first 2 side rows that we have here for the armhole, then 1 single crochet into every side row, because we do have an odd number of side rows right here, but we still want the total amount of stitches that we're going to do for the armhole to be in multiples of 4. So what we're going to do is start with a chain 1. I already have mine completed. And finding that first side row, I'm going to find that top loop, insert, pull through. Into that next top loop, this is mine right here. Insert in through there. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through all 3. That is our decrease. And then from here, 1 single crochet into every side row. So I've just put 1 single crochet into every side row. Now working into the edge of the shoulder, we do still have our almond stitch ridges, I guess we can call them. Now what I want to do is still kind of even them out. So I'm going to continue to do my almond stitch row, making my way all the way up. So my first divot that I have right here is slip stitches. It should be slip stitches for everyone. So what I'm going to do is 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches, make my way all the way up until I reach my shoulder seam. So I've just made my way all the way up to my shoulder seam, and just to double check, we should all have a stitch count that is in multiples of 4. Then what we're going to do is insert our stitch marker into that last stitch on this side of our armhole. Then from here, we're going to repeat everything on the other side. So starting with our first stitch on the other side of our shoulder seam, we're all going to start with 4 back loop half double crochets. So yarn over. Into that first stitch is back loop with a half double. And since we do need to know where our 2 middle stitches are, make sure you're inserting a stitch marker into that stitch as well. Then continue to repeat 4 back loop halves, 4 back loop slips, making our way all the way down. Then once we reach our underarm portion, 1 single crochet into every side row, leaving the last 2, and remember into the last 2 side rows do a decrease of 2 single crochets because we still need the total amount of stitches to be in multiples of 4. Then slip stitch into that chain space and I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed cleaning up our armhole. Now we're going to get started on the length of our sleeve. So what we're all going to do is make a chain that is in multiples of 8, the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. Now since I would like for mine to be a short sleeve, I'm going to start by making a chain 8, which is just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Then from here, all we're going to do is 4 slip stitches, 4 half doubles, leaving the last 4 chains left. So just block off that last chain, do a chain 1, then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, start with our first slip stitch. Then I'll meet you back when we have 4 chains left. We've made our way down. We should all have 4 chains left. Now what we're going to do from here, everyone's last set of stitches will be half double crochets. So we're going to be putting 3 half double crochets, then into that last an increase of 3 half doubles. So into that next stitch with 1 half double, next chain with another half double, and second to last chain with another half double, then into that last chain with an increase of 3 half double crochet. And now that we have that, we're going to slip stitch it into the base. Now since our almond stitches aren't reversible, what we're going to do is make sure that we're working clockwise or to the left, and we're going to start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1, there's 2. Into that second stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch, and now our first row is connected. Next, we need to work our way up to the following row. So slip stitch up the next 2 available stitches into the base. So there's 1, into that next stitch there's 2, and flip our work. Now our second row in our 4-row repeat is going to start with an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. So finding that last stitch from our previous row, not worked into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're all going to start with an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. So there's 1, 2, 3. Then 5 back loop half double crochets. Then once when our 5 back loop half doubles are completed, 4 back loop slip, 4 back loop half double to reach the end of the row. Our row 2 is complete. Now getting started on our repeat of row 3, we're all going to chain 2 and flip. Then we're all going to do 4 back loop half doubles, 4 back loop slip stitches till we all have 4 stitches left. We are at the end of our row 3. We should all have 4 stitches left. Now we're going to do the same increase that we did for row 1. So yarn over into that 4th to last stitch with 1 back loop half double, into that next with our second, next with our third, then into that last stitch, an increase of 3 back loop half doubles. That is our increase. Now we're going to connect it into the base. Now connecting our row 3 into the base is going to be done a little bit differently than our first 2 rows. So just find that next available stitch into the base and insert with a slip stitch. Now that is connected. That slip stitch still doesn't count as a stitch, but we do need to work our way up to the following row. So slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, and repeat. So start with an increase of 3 back loop half double crochets into that first stitch, making sure we're not working into those stitches into the base. Then 5 back loop half double crochets. Then 4 back loop slips, 4 back loop half double to reach the end of the row. So our first 4 rows are complete. We're going to continue to repeat our 4 previous rows until we're worked into our stitch marker stitch. Once we have that, I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the decrease side of our sleeve. So we are back and we've just made our way all the way up until we're worked into our stitch marker stitch. Now we're going to do pretty much the same idea as the front panel, but instead of increases, we're going to be doing decreases. So what we're all going to do is the following row in our row sequence, and I'll meet you back when we have a total of 4 stitches left. But for those of you that have my numbers, I'm going to start with a chain 1, flip my work. Start with 4 back loop slip stitches, 4 back loop half double crochets, and then I'll meet you back. So we've just made our way all the way down with our first decrease row, leaving the last 4 stitches. Now what we're all going to do is just 1 back loop half double crochet into that next stitch. Then into the last 3 stitches, a decrease of 3 back loop half doubles. So yarn over, into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, also into that last, pull through for 5 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 5. That is our decrease. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we normally would. So since this row started off with 4 slip stitches, we're going to close this row off by slip stitching into that second stitch into the base. So there's 1, there's 2. Into that second stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up the next 2 available stitches. There's 1, there's 2, and flip our work. Now to start off the following row, it's going to start with a decrease of 3 back loop half doubles. So yarn over. Into that first stitch's back loop, not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through, next stitch's back loop, pull through for 5 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 5 loops again. Then from here, 3 back loop slip stitches. So there's 1, there's 2 and 3 back loop slip stitches. And from here, continue on with the rest of the row per usual. So 4 back loop half double, 4 back loop slip stitches to reach the end of the row. Now from here, what we're going to do is continue to do our 4 row repeat, making sure that we're doing the decreases the same way that we just did together until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam everything together. So we are back. We made our way all the way down with the decrease side of our sleeve. Now from here, we're going to seam it, but it is going to be the same seam that we did for the side, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. We're all going to make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out, then do our same single crochet seam so we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat this sleeve on the other side, and once we do, we are all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all in the next one. Bye!